I think the challenge of a low budget film in general, like I've never really known anything but a very challenging set. So I'm used to like 22 setups becoming 14. I'm used to the paint hasn't dried on this thing, so we got to shoot it this way. I'm used to like all those kind of problems. So Infinity wasn't really, besides the asbestos potential threats at the start and having to change the sets, the challenge was actually doing a great job. The challenge was actually keeping the commitment level of the film up, was keeping true to the film we started out with. You know, and I think that's one of the hardest things is and also evolving as the film went on. That was probably one of the greatest challenges, because I think again it's probably an evolution thing. Like I think people that talk about, that whinge about like, oh, long hours, and it's like, it's a fucking movie set. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be long hours. It's going to be tough. Shit's going to go wrong. Like that all happens, you know. But what goes beyond that? What was when you can get beyond that? What was the craft? What was the work that you kind of? How did you still make a film within all that? I think that's kind of the interesting thing. So the challenge of the film is actually just honestly keeping people alive, keeping people at a level of sanity where they were still functional, and keeping the crew and everyone together, because I think they thought we were batshit crazy the first few weeks. I know there was a huge division between people. I think half the crew were like, Shane's lost his mind, you know, he's taken too long between films. He's lost his mind. And then I think once they saw the results we were getting, I think then they started to see there was a madness to the method and a method to the madness, so it worked out. It's the job of a director is directing, you know, it's not owning. And I think that's the big thing. It's like, you know, I want Rusty, who's made it, I want him to walk out of that film feeling like, you know, it's his edit, you know, and he really has worked really hard for it. So we're in there every day together, you know, we're always talking. It's funny, I came off the shoot the way it was, and then I went in and Adrian, because he'd lived with this raw, the rush is so long, he had gone down the rabbit hole like everyone else had. And I had this editor that was actually, you know, if it was an intensely fucked up scene, he was like, I'd come in, he was like that for weeks on end, and it was like, oh my God, it's infected everyone. So it was a great process because we, again, lived it. You know, Adrian lived that film. And there was, you know, we had there's one scene in particular between Dan and Luke Ford, which we had 9 hours of rushes, 9 hours of a 4 or 5 minute scene. And we shot it every which way because it's kind of a jump cutty all over the shop sort of thing. And that was one of my favourite days on set, and it was my least favourite experience in the editing because there were so many options, you know, and you always felt like, have I cheated the audience out of a great experience? Have we made the right choice? And we worked really hard though. At the end of it, it's very collaborative between us, because I think that's the thing I've learned is that, you know, you have to have people on the film that do share the vision. And I think that's one of the big things, you know, a lot of times that happens is people want to make sure they put their stamp on the film. But I think if you do if you've got the right team and you're making the right film together, you should all at the very start of the film all be making the same film. And that was what was interesting on Infinity, is I felt that I had amazing producers, and everyone on the film was, all my heads of departments were all making, for the most part, they were making the same movie. They were not trying to change things for change's sake. We all loved what we were doing, and we just wanted to serve Infinity. We wanted to serve the story. We actually had to pull the film from theatres here in this country. Wormwood was a great, not a great, but you know, I feel bad for them on that. The piracy issue is horrendous now. So there's a window here between theatrical and VOD. So what we ended up having to do was, we were going to come out at the same time as America, but America can go VOD theatrical same day, whereas we have to have a big window between theatrical here and VOD. So which means we would be sitting in this no man's land for about 2 or 3 months after it came out in theatres here, where like, you know, what are you going to do? You've seen all the press, you're excited about Infinity, and it's sitting there on a torrent site, you know, and you're a 15-year-old kid, they're going to go and pirate it. So what we wanted to make, so we ended up pulling it from the cinemas to have a same day and date as America. And the rest of the world, I think, are in the 2 or 3 weeks afterwards. The whole world will follow with the same release. And I think that's the future. I mean, it's here right now, isn't it? It's a theatrical VOD. Because I don't go to movies as much. I mean, movies to me have to be an event, a big event film for me to want to spend that much money and go and watch it. You know, and Apple TV, great, bang, bang, whatever I want to see, whenever I want to see it. I think it's a great place we're in, but I think more people have to embrace that. And at the same time, I mean, we're going to make it available for everybody. Like, you want to watch it, here's every fucking platform to watch it. So if you are pirating the film at this point, you are totally saying fuck you to everyone on the film. Like, you're actually saying, I have no respect. Like, I literally just want to take this film. I think you guys are worthless. You know, I'm part of the reason that's killed the middle class of cinema, and fuck you, keep doing it. You know what I mean? And for me, it's just like that's not the type of people we're making the film for, anyway. You know what I mean? If I went into JB Hi-Fi and took 10 DVDs off the shelf, I wouldn't get past the security guy. You know, and yet somehow people feel like it's fine online, just click, get it for free. And I understand the argument that it hasn't been available to them, so we're making it available. So, you know, so there's really no excuse other than I like to steal shit for why you would pirate the film. I mean, my favourite thing about filmmaking in general is the fact that I get to live other lives, you know, and I think that's what influences my approach to a film is, you know, especially why I like science fiction, is because science fiction is a life I'll never get. So this film's set in the 23rd century, I will never get to that point, you know. So it's like I get to see a glimpse of what could be, but I will never know. And I think that's what I like about films in general. You get to inhabit, you get permission to inhabit and live in a space for a certain amount of time. And that's what the audience wants you to do, because you've got to deliver that experience back to them ready to go. So I think the whole journey of Infinity, I think the most rewarding thing was being able to live that journey with the people I got to live it with and go to that space station every day, because I believed I was there. So it was fantastic walking through these corridors on a mining facility on the furthest reaches of space. I was like, I can't believe in my life I got to be here. I got to come and visit this place. And that's a bit bizarre, but you know, my philosophy is more people know that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's father than know who my dad is. So there's almost more truth in the fact that, like, modern, you know, the fact that Luke Skywalker's father is Darth Vader. It's like, well, there's a truth to that. So the idea that it's fictitious, it is, but at the same point, it's a real memory I have about the way those characters go. In the same way, when people watch Infinity, I'll be able to say what happened to that East Coast team when they went in to get Whit Carmichael. Well, this is what happened. So you now have a memory that's real for you, and yet you couldn't tell me my parents' name. You couldn't tell me what I had for breakfast. You know, so what's more truthful? What's more real? So that's why crazy fuzzy logic.
Where are you at right now with the production?
It's done. So it's now we're in the period. We're leading up. I think it's about 7 weeks until it comes out. So we're in the fun period where it's, you know, you've raised your kids and you put them out there in the world, and I'm in pre on my next film. So it's an interesting time to let that one go, and it's interesting talking about it over a year after you finished it, or nearly a year after you finished it, because it's kind of it's interesting because sometimes you feel pretentious, or you feel like it's like, it's a movie. Like, did we really do that crazy shit? But in the moment, it makes a lot of sense, and you have to go there. But when you're removed from that, I mean, I remember when Daniel McPherson came back for pickups, and we finished the movie, finished the pickups, and he went upstairs and we went for a drink at the pub afterwards, and he was a bit late, and he said, I just sat in my car and just broke down, because I'd been hanging on to this for another 3 months between finishing the shoot and having to do the pickups. And once he could let Whit go, once he could come back to the real world, it was a very hard process for him to come back, but it was cathartic as well. And I think that's an interesting thing as well, like to kind of you hold it that much and then you let it go. And now when he and I talk about the film, it is a memory. You know, it's like the idea of, well, did we really do that? Did we really go to those places? It's interesting. Yeah, it was a very tight budget, but you know, it was what we had what we needed to get the story made, and it was funded privately, and all the cast and crew reinvested in the film as well. So they got paid some money to make the film, to live, to get by, but then for the large part they put a lot of their money back into the movie to sort of just to see it get across the line, which was great. And again, it puts a different type of ownership and a different type of energy to the movie, you know, because it's not just a payday. You know, people aren't just turning up and doing their thing. It's like there has to be a trust between everybody that what we're making is going to be good, and what we're making is something people want to see, and that they will eventually, you know, get paid properly as they should be. But I think in the market we're in now, I guess it's any way you can get a film done, trying to figure out what's the best way to sustain an industry, because that's the thing we don't have here. I think we have it's like a bounty hunter thing down here. You do a film and then everyone goes to LA to sort of do what they do over there. And because we don't really have a second, there's no second plan here. So I remember when we did Gabrielle, I went up to the Gold Coast for a film festival and I met with all these great producers, and they all said the same thing: go to LA. Like, you want to do action, sci-fi genre sort of stuff, all go. Like, we're not doing that here. So, you know, we had a successful film that was doing really well, and the industry's advice was to leave, you know, and it was kind of like, whoa. And then you go over there and everyone embraces you with open arms, So it's a very different. But now it's different. That's why I think it's now, you know, the years that have passed, the government's much more supportive. You know, I think the government's doing a fantastic job. And I thought they were terrible when we did Gabrielle. I was a pirate against them all. But now I'm really proud of what of the support they've given us, the support they're giving filmmakers. That show, they have the initiative. And that's the thing I think you hear a lot of people whinging about, we didn't get this and this, and it's like, well, you haven't done anything to prove that you can do it yourself. No, most places in the world don't have any fucking government support. So I think this idea that the government needs to support everybody to make their film, it's like, no, you need to show that you can do something above and beyond the call of duty, that you will go the distance. And then what they've proven to me is that they will be there for you and they will help nurture those careers forward. So, you know, I think they're doing a great job. For me, film school was great because I spent many years since I was about 13 till I was 18, just doing things on Betamax and VHS, and I didn't realise I was learning the principles of filmmaking just by shooting two people when I was 13, going, how come they don't look like looking at each other? You know, and how come when I'm shooting a car and then I go the other side of the road, the car's going the wrong way? You know, I was learning on the job. But then when I went to film school, my first year there was really great to learn all the rules about how things work and here's what you do and lots of stuff. And then you can learn you have to know rules to break them. So I only did a year up at North Sydney. And then I remember my teacher said, like, dude, you should just go and keep doing your thing, just keep making films. And you've now learnt this year what you need to do. Now you just need to go and keep getting practical experience at it. So that's what we did. Then I just worked odd jobs for years. And I'd go, okay, how much do I need to do a short film? There was about 6 of us. We'd all save up $500 each, and then we go shoot a short film. And then we go back to our jobs, you know, and we raise more money, get an edit suite, cut it, you know. So it was great. And you knew the value of every dollar. And that's what was helpful in Gabrielle and very helpful in Infinity was you started to know how much that cost, why that's there, why we're doing this. And as opposed to just kind of getting on a set going, wow, great, I got my storyboards, what do we do? You know, it's great. For me, I think Infinity has awoken more of I think my years in LA, when I was younger, I sort of, with Gabrielle, I thought that very flashy, very bold. I was in love with kind of some quite big visuals, you know, and I think as the years have gone on and I've worked on a lot of different films over there, I think I kind of saw how disposable those movies were. How like you can have like the best action sequence of all time, but if there's not that soul or that integrity to the film, it's gone. Like the next weekend, it's what's next. So I think the films that survive are the ones that try to do something different, that really go for the throat. So I think that's what changed for me. So I think for me, you know, I'm probably just going to keep heading off into the woods, you know, in the jungle, get lost in there somewhere, and that's exciting for me. So I don't think maybe where the trajectory began. I'm not as interested in sort of doing big $100 million blockbusters. I'm sort of much more interested in sort of character studies and those. But I think within a genre space, because I think that's really interesting, because there's always an extremity to sort of a genre-esque film. But then if you treat it like a family drama, it's a strange place to be in, and I'm really excited by that. I think we were confident after Gabrielle, but we didn't expect it to go as big as it did. You know, and Andy Whitfield went through the roof, and you know, and the film was loved all around the world in different countries. And the bigger it got, the more heat came back on us, obviously, with LA. And it's funny, we had a screening in Los Angeles, the first one we ever had, and about halfway through the film, people started walking out. This was an industry screening, and I was like, oh man, you know, we're in trouble. And then I went out to the bathroom to drown my sorrows. And then literally there was like a stock exchange in the foyer. People were trying to get the first meeting, get us the first script, and it was like, oh, they like us, you know. And that was really interesting, because then all of a sudden we went from doing this little indie film to, you know, I was doing the Dark Crystal sequel with the Henson Company, and I was attached to Source Code at Universal, and I had a whole bunch of scripts coming to me that were ready to go. Like, do you want to direct this? Here's a nice healthy pay packet and go do it. And but I had a very specific idea on the type of film I wanted to make. And Dark Crystal, I was so passionate about telling Jim Henson's version of that film, but that's all I wanted to do. I didn't want to do my version of his story. I just wanted to do Jim Henson. I just wanted to shoot what Jim would have wanted to shoot, regardless of what I even wanted. And no one else wanted that. And I think that was my whole beef with that film, why I kind of ended up leaving that one. And then with Source Code, it was really interesting because I was on that for 18 months probably, and I learned a lot about, you know, I really like Bradley Cooper for it, and he and I chatted about it, and I thought he was the best guy for for the role, and I know Jake had just come off Prince of Persia and Zodiac and all that sort of stuff, and he was at a point in his career where he wanted a very specific type of movie, and I just didn't realise at that time how much control, the like people tell you one thing because they need you to understand what you need to know, and then there's the reality of making a film, and I think Source Code was an amazing. I would not. It's so strange. I wouldn't change that experience for the world because it really helped me to become who I am today, because in many ways it showed me I had to learn about the industry, I had to learn about the business side, I had to learn about the things that can really screw filmmakers over, and learn about how come everyone else seems to have more input into this film than I do. How come the distributors and the sales agents and actors and everyone else has more say over the film than I do at this point. And that was really what the Source Code experience was. It was about really owning your voice, because there was a point there in the middle where studios told me one thing and producers told me one thing, and make sure you say this and make sure you do this, and it's like, well, I've kind of got the film I want to make here. It was more like a Jean-Pierre Jeunet version of that script, and we'd worked on the script for so long, and it was really, and then when I watched the film and I saw what sort of had come with it, was a very, I think they wanted to make a very safe movie and they did a great job. Duncan's an amazing director and they did a fantastic job, and I think Jake is a tremendously talented actor. But for me, it was just actually more ammunition to go stick to your voice, stick to what you want to do. And that's what happened on Source Code. I stuck to what I believed the film should be. And you learn at one point where you sit in the order of things, and that was a great lesson for me to go, okay, if I am to have the type of control over a film I want to have, I have to put myself in a very different position in a business sense. So I spent a few years in Hollywood there learning all about the business side. While I was still developing projects, I learned all about the business side, And why I left to come back here was actually because I was attached to my 9th film, and a great producer I've always loved. It's funny, at film school I would have killed to have this producer ring me and say, I want you to do my film. And literally, I was like, great. And I ran my agent. I said, how many films am I attached to right now? It's like 2012. And he said 9. And I was like, yeah, right, but I haven't actually made a film since Gabriel, which came out in 2008. And it's like, so I need to, 4 years, I need to get back on the set. And that was kind of when I made the decision, to come back here and just go for it. And I think I felt it with where Hollywood was at. I feel like there was like thousands of us in the Coliseum watching the main event, Avengers and Avatar and all that sort of stuff. And I look over my shoulder to the city and I go, the whole city's on fire. The whole middle class of film, the whole thing's on fire. Like, I don't think anyone's putting the fire. Hey, whoa, all eyes to the front. All 5,000 of you, eyes to the front. Yeah, but there's only like 10 movies in that pool. There's like 5,000. What is happening over here? The whole thing's on fire. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. We got Marvel. Don't worry about it. And it was like, oh shit, I got to get out. Because once these 5,000 people realize that that's the game and that's gone, they're going to eat each other. So I kind of wanted to be learning cannibalism before the rest of them knew how to. So yeah, that's how we came back here. So when people talk about failure, I guess in any aspect, how do people learn from failure? How do filmmakers coming through learn from failure? I always look at baseball. There's a great baseball coach. He's they say the most winningest baseball coach of all time. And one of the things he says is, you look at baseball. Baseball, if you're a great batter in baseball, you're going to bat 300 for the year, which means every time you step up to the plate, only 30% of the time did you actually get a ball safe and get on base. And you're one of the most successful baseball players in that era. If you bat 350, you're a freak. And I think it's the same with film making. You kind of, not as far as the success, but it's once you define why you're there and what your level of success is, I think it's much easier. I mean, look at James Gunn. Look at what he's been doing. That dude just stuck to what he wanted to do, and then now he's doing Guardians of the Galaxy. But it was a James Gunn style film, and I think that's fantastic when you see filmmakers go all the way through and still stick to what their voice was, and then go all the way through. So I think it's actually understanding that when you come into this industry, if you're batting 300 in the early days, you're batting 200 in the early days, you're doing well. You know what I mean? And I think that's the thing that everyone has to take home with them. And it's like having projects in development, you're gonna have more fall over in general than not. And you've got to be able to willing to just roll with that. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't. And one of the things that I do now is I'm very brutal with myself. I'm very brutal with the reality of the situation. So maybe when I was younger, I would glorify the moment and hope for the best. Whereas now, I'll actually underplay it and prepare for the worst and make sure that that level of the worst I can survive at and still do something well. And I think that's the thing there is just like, I think everyone needs to, you almost need when you're young, you've got to have that hope because you're running on sets, you're doing really shitty jobs. Not that running's a shitty job, but you know, some jobs you don't want to be doing. And then all of a sudden you kind of, you know, through that you learn your way, and it's got to be hard and you've got to be passionate when it's really hard because it's always going to be hard, you know. So I think the way to learn from failure is that there is no such thing, I guess, in this industry because it is an art form. So who's one person to say that song's bad or that song's good, you know, and it just depends on what you measure it by. But all the people I know that measure their careers on awards, box office, and if everyone thinks they're the hot thing, hot flavour of the month, they never end up happy. They don't end up at a good place. Whereas the people I know who are artists that just stuck to what they did for hell or high water, they just stuck to that. They're the ones who are happy, especially at the biggest end of town. In some of those massive film directors, the best ones that I spent time with are the guys that just, and the girls that just stuck to it. You like an Oliver Stone film, or you don't like an Oliver Stone film, it's an Oliver Stone film, you know, as opposed to the ones that were trying to fit, what's the studio want? What do I need to do to stay employed? It's like, well, you know, you're chasing your hungry ghost at that point, you're just chasing your tail.